Hello, my name is Denis Deasy, and I have two autistic sons, Denis, who is 30, and James, who is 25. In this photograph here, James is 15 months, and Denis is 6.5. There you go. This one, James is 5, and Denis is 10. Taking at Christmas time, as you can see. Denis has Asperger's syndrome and ADHD, and James is severely autistic and completely non-verbal. James also has ADHD, OCD, oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety disorders, and epilepsy. I don't claim to be an autistic expert, but as you can already tell, that I've had experience of autism from both ends of the spectrum. So for the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes, I will talk about their typical behaviours and then to go on to describe the impact it has of living with two autistic adults. If I fumble over my words or whatever, I'll just continue rather than stop the video because I will be here all night if that's the case. I have self-published 3 books, from this day forward. It was out on March the 1st. My second book was I'm Sorry My Son's Autistic. And my first one, Living in Harry's World. Whenever I tell somebody that, there you go, nice cover, I like that one. I have 2 autistic sons. Inevitably they say to me, what special talent have they got? Can they draw the world map by memory, or can they solve some complex mathematical equation? A lot of what's written about autism are myths. So I just wanted to write a true account of what it's like living with 2 autistic children or 2 autistic adults. Although these books are fictional, they are based on my life. A lot of what I've written is actually true. I've only done this talk a couple of times, and so I will be referring to my notes. And also, these are broken down by headers, which are normally in the screen behind me the last time I did it. So I might read out the headers from time to time. First of all, I'll talk about Denis. My wife, Joan, is American, and when Denis was 6 months old, we went to live in New Jersey in America. And we stayed there for 4 years. When he was 3, he was in a mainstream school, but with the special units attached to it. Denis was a troublesome child, always disruptive in class and getting into fights. Speech was quite limited. He showed no interaction with his peers, and he would smear his excrement around the house. He was constantly hitting me and Joan, so we saw a child psychologist in New Jersey about his behavioural problems. And both the psychologists and the school just thought he had learning difficulties, and none of the professionals thought that he was autistic. Back in the UK, within a few weeks, when Denis was 4 years old, a paediatrician diagnosed him as autistic. At 5, he went to an autistic school in Surrey, and we felt the school's attitude was a little bit too passive, and he was getting away with a lot. So we moved him out of there fairly quickly, and he went to another school in Surrey, and he stayed there until he was 18. And then he attended a special class in Escott College in Epsom for another 2 years. Now I'll talk about Denis's typical behaviours. And the first heading I got here is disruptive in class. One parent took their child out of school because Denis was constantly hitting them, and the school wouldn't take any action against it. Now, we didn't know anything about this until the mother of this child confronted Joan at a Tesco checkout, and she was screaming at her saying, your son was constantly beating up my son, and school wouldn't do anything about it. And it was, we knew nothing about it, and Joan went home in tears that day, and I got a very emotional phone call from her. I remember that very clearly. No filter. Denis has no filter. If he sees somebody with something physically that's a little bit different, like a big, spot on the nose or whatever, he would point it out to them or to talk to me about it right in front of them, many incidents of his no filter behaviour. That's what we like to call it. I think when a friend of ours, it was her 50th birthday, and she had a big party out in the garden, and they got champagne and chocolates and the like. And I said, Denis, why don't you give her the champagne? She was sitting out in the garden celebrating, and in that time she had put on a lot of weight. And I'll never forget it. Denis plonked the champagne in front of her and said, "My God, you got fat. You look terrible. Anyway, happy birthday." And these were the sort of things that we were going through at the time with Denis, or still do, really, to be honest. That wasn't the best birthday greeting she had that day, I don't think. Thomas the Tank Engine. Denis has been obsessed about Thomas since he was 2 years old. I remember very clearly Joan buying him a jacket that would have fitted him in 6 months later. And I remember saying to her, 6 months' time, he won't be interested in Thomas. And P.S. he's 30 and as obsessed about it as ever. A lot of autistic children, adults, are equally obsessed about Thomas. And I've read various explanations as to why that is. And the one that sort of makes a bit of sense is that in the older Thomas videos, they film models. So if there's an angry Thomas, they would film angry Thomas for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then when the plot changes, they'll take the angry Thomas and put the happy Thomas model and film that. And one theory is that autistic people can identify with that static facial expression. And that sort of makes a bit of sense. A few years ago, we visited the Deasy school in Boston, which is one of the top schools in America, top autistic schools in America. And I asked the person who was showing us around that day, I said, are the American kids as equally obsessed about Thomas as the UK ones? He said, absolutely. It's the one fictional character that they identify with. I remember at one point the school was trying to tell us to wean him off Thomas, which is like trying to get somebody off heroin or something, I don't know. But I remember at the time, Virgin Media, our cable company, were showing back-to-back episodes of Thomas for the whole weekend. And I remember ringing them up and saying, look, you've got to block this channel. And I remember the guy saying, well, why? It's not an adult channel. And I said, no, they're showing too many Thomas the Tank Engine episodes. So it was a bit of a surreal conversation. Public outings, whenever we go out to various places, it could lead to an incident or two. And a couple of incidents spring to mind. We went to see an Irish singer called Cara Dillon, which plays traditional Irish music, and it was a small venue, and we made the mistake really of being right at the front, and we were literally about 4 or 5 feet away from her. And Denis didn't want to be there. He kept saying, I'm bored. And he would have his Kingston A to Z map laid out in front of him, literally more a foot away from her, from where she was singing. And he had his telephone directory he was reading, and which he carries around with him everywhere, his telephone directory. And I remember one time she was doing a preamble to one of her songs about the Irish emigrating to America. And, it was quite a long preamble, and Denis shouted out, just get on with it. And I remember the audience sort of gasped when he did that. Equally, we used to go every Christmas to a pantomime, and it was a professional pantomime, but it was for the audience with special needs. And he hated it, all that he's behind you, all that. He absolutely hated all that. And he didn't want to be there. And I remember one year we were about 6 rows from the front, and there was a bit of a lull in the performance, and Denis shouted out to the actors, "You're all a bunch of bastards." And I remember the actors actually stopped, and a few of them actually looked around to see who gave them that critique. So even in a special needs concert, special needs audience, Denis stood out. I remember one time we went there, and during the interval they always gave out ice cream tubs. It was lovely, and so Denis was excited about that. And then as we were going down the steps, there was an announcement. Well, the owner of this car, blah blah blah, and what it was our car. And what happened was the car caught on fire during the first act. And as luck would have it, a passerby saw it, rang the fire brigade, diffused the situation before anyone got hurt or any other car was involved. Excuse me. But when we went out there, the car was completely black, and there was police there and everything. And I remember being interviewed by a policeman about this, that, and the other. And Denis was just pulling away at me, just wanted his ice cream. I remember saying to the policeman, "Sorry, mate, I have to go. Denis got to get his ice cream." So, yeah, took preference. Lack of empathy. A lot of autistic people have lack of empathy and are very self-centred. I remember a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it was our 30th wedding anniversary, and we decided for the first time since Denis was born to go on a short break to Barcelona, a 3-day break. James was at residential, so my sister very kindly offered to look after Denis. But when he found out that she was that the flight was coming in at 11 o'clock that night, or we weren't be able to pick him up until 11 o'clock that night, he said, "No, that's ridiculous. You have to cancel the holiday." Because he has to go to bed at a certain time. He doesn't like staying out late. Just ring up the pilot and tell him to leave a bit early. I remember him saying that to me. And then, but cancel the holiday. He kept saying cancel the holiday for weeks to put it up to it. So, but we went ahead with it. And I remember we did pick him up, and he wasn't in a particularly good mood when we picked him up at whatever time. And I remember Brenda, my sister, was staying next to him. I remember him saying, and her cooking is shit. And she was sitting next to him. It isn't. It's very nice, but it's just different to Jones. In your face, he's very much in your face when you greet him. He grabs you around the neck, even though we've told him 1,000 times, don't do that. Don't greet people like that. And he does that to people he doesn't even know that well. Taking his clothes off. Denis would always take his clothes off when he goes to the toilet to do a number 2. And regardless of and who is with us, when he comes out, whether we're in a pub, a restaurant, or a gathering at the house, he goes, "Okay, I admit it. I've taken all my clothes off." Yeah, he's been doing that for as long as I can remember. Leaving Denis on his own. Denis can be left on his own, and he likes that. He likes the independence of that. But he can't do any cooking or operate the washing machine. It's very much, watching TV and, got on the computer and that. But he does help, do the washing up and all that, and taking the rubbish out. He does his bit. Denis's dress sense. When November comes round, Denis will get his Arsenal bobble hat and scarf on. It's winter. That's it. And that hat and scarf will remain on him until mid-April. If we get lovely days in March or some in February, it doesn't matter. It's winter. He will wear the hat, scarf, regardless of the weather. Social life. Denis is a social person. He has friends, but mainly ex-class friends, but doesn't get together with them that often. They arrange special needs discos, which he goes along to when you could. And he goes to the cinema on his own again when it was allowed. But most of the social life revolves around his family. Train journeys. Denis is very keen to travel independently, and he misses. That's the one thing he does miss about the lockdown situation. But the problem with Denis is he talks to himself a lot, and it's all video, as he calls it, video talk. He just recreates a scene from a film or whatever. And that makes him vulnerable and a target. And one of his friends got badly beaten up, a few years ago when his gang of kids obviously picked up on the fact that he was special needs. And, so I always say to Denis, don't talk to yourself when you're on the trains. And he always says, but the public like my video talk. If the train runs on time, it's great. But sometimes, trains are delays and cancellations, and there are a lot of times where he just gets on the next train. And I get a phone call from a Guildford or somewhere like that, which is half an hour away. Dad, I'm in Guildford. Can you pick me up? Like myself, Denis loves getting autographs and meeting celebrities. He's built up quite a collection. He has written to so many. He's got replies from people like so many. Jim Carrey has written to him a couple of times. Whoopi Goldberg, Phil Collins. There's been quite a few. The thing is, he always carries them around in his backpack. He's got a huge collection now. And I said, Denis, if you ever lost them, you'd be so distraught, He met the actor Warwick Davis. Actually, it was about, a year and a bit ago, shortly before a lockdown. And when you meet these people that you admire, you ask them about their career. Denis, knowing that he was born in Epsom, Surrey, was talking to him about all the houses he lived at in Epsom, all the towns he visited, shopping and all that sort of thing. And they spent 10 minutes talking about Surrey. And Warwick Davis was absolutely lovely. He picked up straight away that he was special needs, and it was delightful. Routine driven. Denis is extremely routine driven. We never say anything. We try not to say anything in advance, in case the plan has changed and he can't handle it. Why did you change your mind? It's always that. When he wakes up, the question he normally asks at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever time, what are we having for dinner? And we say, well, we'll just have to wait and see. And I remember when Denis was much younger and we were going to go to America, to visit Joan's folks, and we would never tell him because he would be so wound up. So what happened was when he went to bed that night, we would frantically pack our cases, and in the morning he'll get up and we'll say, oh, by the way, we're going to America today, as if it was like spur of the moment type thing. Cancer research and Sainsbury's. Denis started doing voluntary work at cancer research about 9 years ago. And in December 2014, he started working part-time at Sainsbury's. But I remember preparing him for the interview, and I remember saying to him, they're going to ask you, why do you want to join Sainsbury's? And I remember him saying to me, because I'll be able to get great lunches there. And I had to sort of prep him a little bit more. And I remember I had to sit in with him for the interview, and he did absolutely brilliantly. Walking out of there, I just felt a very proud father. He was absolutely brilliant. There have been some minor issues, especially initially. One that springs to mind is when a 76-year-old man wanted to purchase a bottle of wine, and Denis asked for ID to prove he was over 18. Luckily, the man took it all on board and saw the funny side of it. One of his friends, shortly before Denis joined Sainsbury's, worked for Tesco's, and on the first day, he was putting out, so I think it was cheeses, where he had to put the newest ones at the front and the oldest ones at the back. And a lady came and said to him, excuse me, do you know where such is? And he said, F off, can't you see I'm busy? In his mind, he had that task of doing that, and she was interrupting him. That could easily have been Denis, because at one point we never thought he'd get the job. And unfortunately, that guy didn't last too long at Sainsbury's, which was a real shame. Right, now we're going to go on to James. As I mentioned before, James is completely non-verbal. He did start to speak simple words, but lost all the speech by the time he was 2. When he was 2, we noticed how far behind he was other children of his age. He showed no interest in anything, no interaction, very insular. And given Denis's background, we were part of a case study at Guy's Hospital in London. and we went through there for tests. We were there for hours, and I remember there was 3 consultants there, and I remember them saying to us, one of them saying to us, your son James is on the autistic spectrum, and it was like something out of a film when the lips were sort of moving, but I couldn't remember anything else that they said. It was devastating, even though we knew it was a strong possibility. To hear that news again was shattering. I remember walking around London with Joan afterwards in a bit of a trance. At 5, he went to an SLD school with an autistic class, and he was there till he was 17. In his early years, he was a happy and contented child, as opposed to Denis. But by the time he was around 10, his aggressive behaviour began to unravel. He was hitting the school staff and touching them inappropriately, which I'll talk about in more detail shortly. James takes a cocktail of medicine. He takes Epilim for his epilepsy, 18 tablets a day, propranolol, a beta blocker for his anxiety, aripiprazole for his aggressive outbursts, sertraline to control his serotonin levels, which helps with the OCD, and quantiferin for his ADHD. Residential placements is the next heading. James had 2 residential placements. The first one when he was 17, and it was a disaster. And I remember one of the first things they said to us when we visited there, they said, quote unquote, "There is nothing you can teach us about autism that we don't already know." At PS, there was a hell of a lot. They just couldn't handle James. We'd like now we have him at the weekend, so we pick him up on Friday and drop him off on Sunday. And I remember it got to the point when we were dropping him off on Sunday, and the staff would come out with hockey shins, not just football shin pads, hockey shins right up to their thighs, because he was kicking them, and the atmosphere was absolutely toxic. So we had to take him out there. And now he's in his current placement is actually working out really well for him. So it's all good. Now James's behaviour is what we'll talk about. The taxi incident. When James was 16 years old, what happened was he'll get a taxi from our house to his school. And when he was 16, during that short taxi ride, he managed to kick in one of the windows and actually smashed the windows of the taxi and proceeded to throw all his clothes out. And it was a cold January morning. It was snowing. And by the time Joan picked him up, he was just in his underpants, and the clothes were somewhere between Oxshott and Surbiton. We know the taxi driver. We know her to this day. She's a very good friend of ours. And there was no obvious reason why that happened. And these were the sort of things that we were dealing with at the time. Car journeys. Whenever James gets into a car, he'll get the metal part of the conveyor belt, or not conveyor belt, the seat belt. Sorry, yeah, and he would crack me across the head with it. I often put on a sort of bicycle's helmet, so just to he doesn't hold back. A lot of times I have to wear a bicycle's helmet. Again, this is OCD behaviour, and he never does this when Denis is in the car with him, which is, bizarre. He has his own little set of rules. Beards, glasses and watches. Now, James goes through various periods of doing these things, and one of them is flicking beards. And you're walking down the street and you see a man with a beard and you start flicking him. Glasses again, he'll flick the glasses and strangers in the street, which is a bit invasive and doesn't go down particularly well. Watches is flicking the watches. These OCD behaviours, they come and go, but they always come back. Now we'll talk a little bit more, about his OCD behaviour. On a daily basis, James will headbutt, pinch the skin on your face, the ears, the arms, bite the hair. That was the reason why I cut my hair short, and now really it's short. There's no no leverage for him to bite anything there at the moment. And he'll stamp on his feet, he'll touch breasts, punch my testicles. I went for a long period of wearing a cricket box. He does this mainly to family members and residential staff currently, although for a very short period, thankfully, he was doing this to members of the public, which, as you can imagine, was very stressful. He still approaches strangers in the street, and I'll talk about this shortly. All this is a severe OCD behaviour. Reactions to James' behaviours is diverse, but for me and Joan, if he pinches or stamps on the feet or whatever, our reaction is to overreact. Say, "Oh, James, you're hurting me," and then he wants to apologise to you straight away. Excuse me, I just want a glass of water. So if you overreact to him, it sort of tends to diffuse the situation. Conversely, if you try to stop the actions, he will come at you much more aggressively, and the intensity of the attack will be stronger. When we dropped James's off at his residential placement, one of his OCD behaviours is he'll get a shoe and he'll just place it on one of the staff's head. That's what he does, isn't it? It just places it. Some of the staff don't like that, and they will resist it. And if they do, he'll come at you hammer and tong, and it won't be a placement; it'll be more of a hit. No sense of danger. He has no sense of danger. He sees a sweet shop across the other side of the road. Excuse me. He is completely oblivious of the traffic. He doesn't even look at whatever's in front of him, and we have to hold on to him. And he's like 5'11" and a strong 25-year-old. We're getting older and weaker, so that's a little bit of a worry. Throwing objects into neighbours' gardens. He has been doing this for as long as I can remember. It could be anything from mobile phones, cutlery is a big thing. When we have the washing out on the line, he'll throw clothes out there, CDs, he's been doing this all the time. Throws his own toys out there, and then he goes like that. He wants them back. And one incident that sort of springs to mind is my mother-in-law from New Jersey was over 1 year, and nearly all of her front set of teeth are false teeth, and she put them in a cup of water in the bathroom. I think you know where this is heading. And at night, in the morning, it wasn't there. And there's only two explanations. He could have flushed them down the toilet. I'm not sure if he can, because there was quite a few teeth there. I'm not sure if he could do that, but the more logical one is he got up and threw them out into the garden. And I remember knocking on the next door neighbour's door and saying, "Can you ever look for my mother-in-law's front teeth?" And they were never found. The impact of living with two autistic adults is the next heading. I read somewhere that if you have one autistic child, the divorce rate is 80%. I can't verify how accurate that total is. But what I do know is a large number of parents, autistic people children that we know, are either divorced or separated. Bringing up a normal child is hard enough, but you have to multiply that many times over when you have an autistic child. Worry. As I've already mentioned, James is an excellent residential placement right now, and it's the only way forward for him. However, it's an emotional roller coaster for us all. It's a wonderful feeling when we pick him up on Fridays, even though he rarely smiles when he sees us initially, and spends the first 10 minutes going through all his OCD rituals, biting hair, touching breasts, testicles, etc. But conversely, it's very depressing when we have to drop him off on Sunday. We've never got used to that. The journey back home on Sunday is usually spent in silence. We've been told many times that if we had normal children, they would be leaving home, going to university by the time they're James's age. But this comparison is just nonsense, because and somewhat insulting, really. Normal children, then go on to get jobs, marry, and possibly have children of their own, and lead an independent life. For James, this will never happen. And I worry all the time about his residential care. It's great now. Well, what happens if new staff come in, they're not so caring? So that's always a constant worry. Another very dark thought I have sometimes is how will James and Denis cope when me and Joan are no longer around? James in particular has no understanding of the concept of death. So if I was a bit distracted there, it was quite early in the morning and I can hear movement upstairs, so I may have to, it's the only time I can do this because of both of them, so I may have to interrupt this at some point. I can hear movement up there. Sleep deprivation. Both Denis and Jane did not sleep well for many years. If they were up, either me or Joan would be up, as they usually went wandering downstairs looking for goodies. For a number of years, I only went to work on a couple of hours sleep. It was like having a newborn baby for like a decade. On one occasion, I had to meet a client at work, someone I had met before. And as she was talking to me, I work in IT, and she was telling me about some sort of IT project that was going on. And as she was talking to me, I was nodding off. The subject matter was boring anyway, to be honest. And I remember very clearly she said to me, "Sorry, am I boring you?" I felt like saying, "Well, you are actually," but no. I said I explained the situation to her, and she was incredibly understanding. Of course, sleep deprivation leaves you on edge, and if both parents are suffering, you can see why relationships are put under strain. And in the books, one of the themes throughout the books is the pressures it puts on parents having special needs children. Carry on as normal. Some friends of ours in the autistic world heavily restrict the social activities of the special needs children. They don't go on holidays or to restaurants or pubs because they know it will inevitably lead to a scene and stressful experience. And I totally understand that. Whatever works for each family, I'll say that again. I totally understand whatever mechanism works for the family. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words there. But we made the decision for very early on to be as normal as possible with Denis and James. Visiting restaurants and pubs always leads to an incident, but for us, there is no alternative. We didn't want to end up resenting our children for restricting our movements. James, when we go to a pub, will nearly always try to grab somebody else's drink. There's a local club near us, and we go there, and James is very well known there. And when we're sitting down, and he wants to go to the toilet, he makes a toilet sign. They would all cover their drinks and hold them closely to them because they know he's going to go after them. I remember we went to this club, and it was just before lockdown. It was beginning of last year, and there was an old man there, and he was very smartly dressed in a suit, and not a suit, it was a shirt and trousers. And again, James wanted to go to the toilet, a toilet sign, and he dashed over to this guy, took a gulp of his beer, and normally James is not fussy, whatever it is. It could be beer, Coke, wine, it doesn't matter. But this guy was drinking cider, and James didn't like the taste of it, and he promptly spat it all over the guy's shirt. He spat a lot, because he takes a big gulp, does James. And the guy was incredibly understanding about it, and it looked like an expensive shirt. So many. One time we were in this beer garden. It was a lovely summer's day, and big beer garden, and we went to right at the other end. There was one guy in a suit right at the other end, sitting there reading the newspaper. And as soon as he sat down, James ran over, and of course he's young and fit, and I'm running after him. Took a big gulp of the guy's beer, and then helped himself to his peanuts. The guy just sort of looked up at him. He didn't even try to stop him. And I always think, I wish I could take a picture of the expression. See this 5'11", 24-year-old man come drinking their beer and all that. And again, the guy was very understanding. He went for a long period, doesn't do so much now, when we went to a restaurant grabbing people's chips and what have you, which doesn't go down well. Flights. As my wife is from New Jersey, we have made many transatlantic flights. And as you can imagine, this hasn't been without issues. One of the things he does, and he always has done, and to this day he does it, is he kicks the seat in front. He's constantly kicking the seat in front of him. We try to get Denis to sit in front of him if we can. And if you're on a transatlantic flight, if you're a passenger sitting in front of James, and your seat's going forward every few minutes, you ain't going to be happy. A couple of years ago, we go to Italy a lot, and we went to Bari. We had to get a flight to Milan, and then Milan down to Bari. And in that short flight, connecting flight, which is only like an hour and a half something, James was expecting a meal of sorts, and the stewardess brought a small glass of water and peanuts. And as she leant over him to give him that, he spat in her face, all over her face. And again, she was so understanding. That's not in her job description, believe you me. Flights are stressful. Equally with Denis, as you probably know, the plane food isn't exactly Michelin star standard. And whenever Denis, the steward or stewardess gives him the food, he would like shake his head and he goes, "No, that's shit," and just hand it back to me. He'll always say something like that. His assessment is usually pretty accurate on that. I remember when Denis was about 8 or 9, we were going to America, and the flight took over, and after a few minutes, took off. And after a few minutes, Denis said, "Are we in America yet?" I said, no, it takes 7.5 hours. Of course, he didn't have any concept of time, and he just repeated that question for throughout the 7.5 hours, every few minutes. Church, as I've already mentioned, Denis, as I already mentioned, we try to lead as normal life as possible, and we're Catholics, and part of that is we go to Mass every week again when we were allowed to. We went for a very long period with James. He didn't want to be there, and he would spit at me and Joan throughout the duration of the Mass. The Mass lasts for like 45 minutes, an hour, but we went through that long period, and we came out the other end, and now he doesn't mind going there at all. It's part of his routine. One Mass in particular sticks out. James wasn't in a particularly good frame of mind that day, and walking up the aisle to get the Holy Communion, and as the priest was giving the Holy Communion, he gave the priest the biggest kick in the shins. I remember the congregation gasped. It's not the sort of thing you see normally during the Mass. And I remember the priest went down and he went, "Oh," and I thought he was going to say the F word, but he didn't. He just refrained from doing that. And I remember meeting him afterwards and saying, apologised to him, and he was really sweet. And he said, no, he goes, the congregation would begin to fall asleep at that point, and you woke them up, so you did a good thing, which I thought was very nice. I'm sorry, my son's autistic. There you go. That is a daily catchphrase of mine. And it's mainly aimed at James. Let me tell you how James approaches members of the public and their reaction to him. He never goes up to children or teenagers, it's always adults. He goes through a routine where he may lick their hands, he gets their hands and starts licking them, which at the best of times doesn't go down well. In this particular situation where we're in now, it does not go down well at all. He may lick the back of the shoulders, which if they're wearing a jacket, they're not usually aware of it. He'll stamp on their feet, not aggressively, but but he still does it. I remember the Chelsea and Arsenal goalkeeper, Peter Cech. We saw him in Waitrose there not that long ago, and I was, as you probably know, I always go up to them, and it was just after he retired, thankfully, because James went up to him, just stamped him on his foot. If he was still playing for Arsenal and got an injury, I think we would have been in trouble there. And again, he was lovely. He took it all on board. Or he may get, he may get their elbow and just give him a gentle headbutt. Nothing too aggressive, but understandably they're startled, even a bit frightened to see a 5'11" guy approach him like this. But either me or Jonah, usually both of us, are there with him, and we try to reassure him, to explain that it's just James' ways of saying hello. Despite this, the reaction is very mixed. Some are very angry, some accept it reluctantly. That's the huge majority of reactions. It's usually a negative reaction. But some people try to engage him in conversation, but he's not interested in that. It happens several times during the course of the day. His eyes are usually glazed over as he's about to do it, almost as if he's in a trance. We always steer him away from elderly people. As soon as he gets out of the car, he's looking around. He's like, he's tensed up. And if there is an elderly person there, no way will he go up to them. If he doesn't fulfill his OCD behaviour, he gets very angry and very aggressive. The various consultants who review his medicine asked us to keep track of the number of people that James approaches. And again, just before lockdown, beginning of last year, we went to Kingston, and during a 90-minute shopping trip there or thereabouts, he approached 68 people. I remember counting them. He seems to have his own set of OCD rules, that thing about cracking the head with the car seat belt. He always does it when I'm there, but he never does it when Denis is there. And he went through a period where he would approach strangers in Waitrose and Sainsbury's, but never in Tesco. And it's only the last year or so that he's changed that, and now he approaches everybody in all the supermarkets. Right. Here, what do readers think of my books? Living in Harry as well. Sorry, my son's autistic, and from this day forward. I think parents who have autistic children have taken comfort in the fact that they're not alone, that they can see these behaviours and identify with them. And parents of normal children will hopefully be enlightened by the issues faced bringing up an autistic child. And a lot of comments on Amazon reflect this. There is a lot of humour in these books. The stressful moments, like when he spits cider onto that guy, can be quite humorous on reflection. I needed humour as it could be a very dark subject matter. When I got the first few copies of Living in Harry's World, I gave one of them to Denis and tried to explain the outline of the book. I remember he told me, this is just a parody of me and Thomas. And he took it off me and put it by his shoes in the bedroom floor, and there it remains. He hasn't read a word of it, and I haven't bothered giving him book 2 or 3 because it didn't seem that interesting. This book here, I don't want to harp on too much about the books, but this book here goes from the present day when Harry is 30 years old, like Denis is 30 years old. But it goes back to when Harry, i.e. Denis, was first diagnosed, and that was quite an emotional book for me to write because there was a lot of unknowns at that time and all the stress that me and Joan were going through. It's a very personal book, that one. So now, in summary, even though every day brings challenges, not only for me and Joan, but also for my boys, I think they're both in a good place. Although we know that James would much rather be at home with us, he seems happy enough to go to his residential home on Sunday, and they keep him busy there all the time, which is what he needs. And overall, he's much calmer now than he was a while ago. In fact, he has been with us during the lockdowns periods. He's been with us since early November now because we didn't, you know, like we wouldn't be allowed to see him, understandably, and he wouldn't be able to cope with that. So he's been with us for a long period of time now. It's the longest he's been with us for a few years. Getting the Sainsbury's job has given Denis a lot of confidence, and he absolutely loves it. He is one of the very few people, if the only person, if the only person I know that looks forward to his working day. Whenever we go into Cobham, the town where he works, for a coffee, me and Joan and James, he will tag along with us, and he'll pop into the Sainsbury's to help him out, even though it's his day off. I want to help out my friends at the store, he says. Now here's a couple more photographs. This is when, hold on, how old is Denis here? 15, is it? Yeah, Denis is 15 and James was 9. And that's a typical James sort of expression, that far away look in his eyes. Love that picture. This picture was taken, I'd say, about 15 months ago. There you go. So, thank you all very much for listening. All my books are available on Amazon and Waterstones, etc., if you want to purchase them. I hope that one day, in a not too distant future, that we can meet up. I could have this presentation in front of real people, because one of the pluses I like from my limited experience of doing this sort of thing is meeting the parents afterwards. The majority of the people who come to these talks are parents, and listening to their personal experiences, I find it generally very humbling. Thank you again for listening, and take care, everybody. Cheers.